To preface, I live in a country that employs a large foreign/expat workforce in pretty much every industry and in all levels. For someone to move here for work, they have to be sponsored by a company or the individual that's employing them. I own and operate a small restaurant business here and employ more than a handful of foreigners as servers, cleaners, kitchen staff, drivers, etc. So here's the story. I was lounging on my couch enjoying the last of my weekend one day when I get a call from telling me that one of our sponsored employees, a server, let's call her Janice, was picked up for indecent exposure essentially. Long story short, she was caught hooking up with a guy in a private booth at a local restaurant. Basically, the police walked in on them whilst engaged in some seriously heavy petting. They were fully clothed, but the guy she was with, or practically on top of I should say, has his junk out. Turns out he works at the restaurant 2 doors down from where she worked. After a bit of chastising and threatening to escalate the situation and have them deported to sufficiently scare their senses back into them, they let them go, but not before signing a pledge-type document promising to never repeat the offense, or else. A slap on the wrist basically, and everyone got to go home. But it doesn't end there. That night something clicked in my brain and I had the thought, how and why did the Paolisi find them in a private booth in the back of a restaurant before the restaurant's own staff did? So I called the restaurant the next day. I thought maybe they called the police on them immediately for some reason. Or maybe the couple got belligerent when staff asked them to stop. Turns out the staff didn't notice a thing. In fact, up until that day, the police have never been to that restaurant before, and when they did, they simply walked in, went straight to the back booths where the two were sat, and busted right in. I realized this meant that someone must have seen them and called the cops on them point blank. The question was who. I decided to speak to Janice. I wanted to speak to her anyway that day, both to check in and get her version of the situation. I also gave her the employer you did something stupid chat and reassure her that she's keeping her job. I also wanted to ask her who she thought called her in. Without hesitation, she said it had to be Sami, who was one of our drivers. Why do you think it was Sami? I asked. He's the one that dropped me off at the restaurant that day. He might have seen my friend walk in right after me and called the police on us. She said, I knew the part of him dropping her off was true, that literally his job and her only free mode of transport. Well, that sounds a bit drastic. Why would he do that even if he had seen you do anything? I asked. She claimed it was because he was jealous. He was really into her apparently and kept trying to get her into bed, she said. What genuinely pissed me off was when she told me that he actually tried to force himself on her once and she fought him off, and that he hasn't tried or even said anything since other than be very short and curt with her. My immediate response was, why on earth would you not tell me or one of your managers right away? She said she had dealt with it her way, and it stopped. Plus, she didn't want anybody to get fired on her account, and she didn't want any interaction with the authorities, so she decided not to make a big deal out of it in the first place. She also declined to press formal charges against him, which I advised her to do. Her declining infuriated me even more. This guy was going to get off scot-free. Now clearly I was about to fire Sami, but in my mind that wasn't enough. For someone to attempt to rape a person basically, and not get in trouble for it. Not ok with me, but it seemed like it was something I had to live with. Obviously, my next conversation of the day was with Sami. My intent was to confront him with the accusations. I called him into my office. I didn't really know where to start, so I went with, obviously you've heard about what happened to Janice this weekend. He stepped in it right away. Heard about it. Came the unexpectedly proud response from a proud AF and positively beaming Sami. I called it in. And this is where it started to get super satisfying. You see, for a couple of years since I met Sami, every now and then he would pull out and show us all pictures of his wife, who was back home living with his mother. She was younger than him and quite beautiful, but sadly barren, which is apparently why she settled with an older fart like him. He was so proud of how pretty she was. He was also a devout religious man, or so he claimed. So I asked, "And why call the police?" He came back with, "After I dropped her off, I waited to see who she was meeting, because she's a troublemaker woman. When I saw the man walk in after her, I called police because I know him, and he is married. And this is against the laws of God and man." I'm smiling now. I knew I got him. Why do that instead of calling your direct manager, or even me, and before even seeing for yourself what they were doing exactly at that? Why make it my problem and the company's problem what she does in her own time? Silence. Head down, counting his shoes. "Sonny, I know why. I know what you did. Janice just told me. I'm disgusted by you, and sorry that we hired you." He had the audacity to mumble, "I only tried once, sir." I almost slapped him. Anyways, I fired him, handed him a one-way ticket home, which was in 4 hours, and told him to GTFO. This is where I get my not-so-petty revenge. I had his house phone number saved somewhere from we hired him. It was on his CV. I knew that because I called him there to interview him before we first hired him. I waited until his flight took off and dialed the number. I assumed either his mother or wife would answer the call, but I was wishing for the latter. I got my wish. "Hello, Mrs. Sami. I'm your husband's employer." Well, his former employer anyway. "Just so you know, I fired him a few hours ago, and he's on a flight home as we speak. His flight number is XXXXX. He will be arriving at XXXX. Just so you are aware, I was forced to fire him because he attempted to rape a fellow employee half his age. I'm sorry," I said, and promptly hung up, but not before hearing her gasping in shock. I have a story that started before the COVID pandemic and just concluded a while back. Obligatory first-time poster, and English is my third language, so forgive any errors I may make and my use of words. I am a typical simple guy who just likes relaxing, and was born with the proverbial silver spoon in my mouth. I am the black sheep of my family, and a middle child to boot, double whammy. But I at least have a little brains and some luck, which I kind of use on a day-to-day basis. Due to my parents' connections, I managed to get into lucrative schools in my country, did my military service, and was promoted upward to captain, and later on was shipped off to college out of country. I have never been too close with many people apart from my circle of friends, and I prefer it that way. After my college, I was employed in government, you guessed it, family connections, and after a few years was able to use my name to get ahead and meet people who helped me set up several businesses in my area, a coastal city, where this story happens. The money I used was generally allowances, small inheritance from my late grandma, some investments, a fund that was started when I was a baby, and money gifted to me by family, basically an attempt not leave me broke enough to embarrass them, even though I'm a simple low-maintenance fellow lol. My businesses are booming since the coastal area we live in attracts a lot of tourists, local and international. And of course some locals who wish to mingle with the tourists to get green cards, pen pals, spouses, and such. Typical coastal city, I guess. The incident. As a proprietor of my businesses, I have most if not all of my staff on salary, since it's the best way for them to gain benefits and is easier for me as a business owner tax-wise. Tipping is more of a gift, typically, since we do not have a tipping culture, and I have my staff on comprehensive medical insurance, which has additional dental and optical on top of the national governmental healthcare medical scheme. Our government hospitals provide all services free, but wait times for elective surgeries are exhausting. We also have a mandatory legal requirement to provide employees with retirement benefit savings, minimum of 21 working days leave. I give 30. And my businesses offer paid overtime, unhindered medical leave for surgery and serious conditions, which can be extended, as well as allowances to seek treatment, such as chemo or dialysis. One of my female employees, an older lady who is brilliant, and had moved up the ranks to manager and was adored by all, was booked for a hysterectomy since, as she told me, she was at risk of cervical cancer, as her mother had passed from it a few years back, and since she already had 4 kids, it was the most logical step. She did her due diligence and found a private hospital, which was in our system, where she could have the procedure done. On the planned date, she applied for leave days, which we obviously rejected since this fell under the scope of medical leave. She went on to have the procedure successfully and had a quick recovery time. The bill was to be catered for by the company insurance, and we had made sure to get all the necessary pre-authorizations. A few months later, she came to work looking distraught, and in all honesty, we thought that she had been told that she had gotten cancer since she had asked for a day off to go for review and tests. But what happened was much worse. She had been given a bill by the hospital since the insurance had refused to pay for it, citing that it was not in the scope of cover. We were livid since we had made sure everything was in effing order. I sent my accounts manager to go have a talk with the insurance people as we tried to calm her down. The manager came back super angry and told me that basically after showing them the evidence, the insurance people just told him to buzz off. I decided to personally go visit that office and get a clear understanding of what was happening. They kept me waiting for an hour, and even after that had the audacity to inform me the director from the head office who was in the area had declined to meet me because he was quote-unquote busy. I was pissed to the high heavens, so I decided to go to their head office in the capital city, a 2-hour flight. The head office was no help and informed me that they had revised their policy and that it was not covered. I asked when the policy was revised. They informed me a month prior. I informed them the surgery was done 5 months prior, and we had all the documentations. They claimed that it was 12 months retrospective. I inquired why I was not informed of it, since this was big news, and I have held policies with them, and they told me that they had informed their large clients and would inform the other clients when their insurances were due for renewal. I demanded to speak to their boss, company vice president, since the CEO was not around, and they boldly told me he had no time for me and frankly that, in verbatim, "We are a large company and have no time to argue semantics with low-end clients. If you don't like it, you can frankly leave and find a new insurance company." The revenge. If I had been initially pissed, I was full-blown mad. I was livid and filled with rage. In all my years, I may have experienced some disrespect, and I accepted it not to make problems, but this time it went too far. I decided in the heat of the moment to switch everything and be done with them. I flew back home and just plain went to the hospital and settled the bill in full and took the receipt to my employee, who initially insisted that she would do anything to pay me back, but I refused since it was no way her fault and ill be damned if she pays for something that was way out of her control. I had a few days to cool down and talked with my directors. The word still itched on my mind. I asked how long it would take us to switch to another insurance. They went ahead and checked out a few large rivals of the insurance we had and discovered that if we switched, it would take 6 months for the new insurance to provide full coverage. The firm we picked, who I'll call New Insurance, offered us a way better deal to the one we had, and not only comprehensive cover, dental, and optical, they also included mental health cover, physiotherapy and occupational therapy cover, rehabilitative services, mobility device acquisition, prosthetics and wheelchairs for some of the disabled employees, smart cards for direct payment on outpatient visits, kind of like a debit card, and a dedicated team of relationship managers, death and funeral benefits, and an expanded coverage area, plus up to 6 dependents plus spouse cover. It would cost me a little more, but I didn't really care. The people who dealt with us from our previous insurance, who I'll call Old Insurance, seemed unfazed that I was pulling my company from them, since they thought it was just a small business. They looked puzzled when I came in with several people and a few boxes of documents. What they failed to realize was that apart from that one business, which is a restaurant, I have 3 popular bars, a cab company, a hotel resort, cleaning service chain, the building and residential guard service, and several rental buildings in the town and around the country. Their shock was compounded when they were informed by the lawyer just who I am. The shock, awe, confusion, and panic when they heard my family name was an extremely satisfying sight. Cue the pleading and attempted negotiations and apologies. It was so big that the news reached their head office, who sent not only their director, the one who was apparently too big to see me, but also their chief legal officer, chief financial officer, and president of the company. I somehow also earned a personalized call from their CEO, who was abroad. No amount of sweet talking was changing my mind, and by the end of 6 weeks we had completely removed ourselves from the old insurance. It was now a waiting game to the beginning of the new insurance cover, and we really hoped that no one would become unwell by that time. But we were ready just in case. In that waiting time, and after the new insurance commenced, I talked to my friends and my family on one of my holiday visits. My older brother's kids adore me, and my family kind of realize they were a holds to me and are trying to re-enter my life, and thought that was that. Aftermath. My friends and family took my words and also pulled their businesses from the insurance to other insurances. The company took such a huge hit, and when COVID came around and was a big deal, they were barely floating. They went into receivership soon after and were acquired by the insurance I had moved to, who happened to be their greatest rivals. The directors and CEO were given their golden parachutes and resigned, and most of their employees were luckily retained apart from the senior executives, including the ones who told my manager to buzz off. In a cruel twist of irony, the building they were operating on in our town was sold, and if you guessed I purchased it, you would be absolutely correct. I decided to remodel the inside and turn it to a business rental space. All in all, it was a bit of a sweet payback, and wherever they are, I hope those disrespectful guys learn that everyone is human and they are not above anyone, and remember that karma is a cold and heartless witch. EDIT to ADD. My goodness, this post has blown up. I have gotten some awards and am grateful for it. Some of your comments have me silently chuckling to myself. Am happy I made your day and hope you get bosses who understand, or you become an understanding boss yourself. In my post I realized I said that my employee applied for leave, which we rejected since it fell under the scope of medical leave. What I meant was I rejected her request for normal leave days, since I wanted her to utilize the unhindered medical leave days, since I did not know how long recovery would take, and I wanted her to keep earning her salary even as she rested. As for my English, I was sent to an English-speaking country for college where my limited English was expanded, and it's my third language with me counting the 2 local languages I know. Thank you again, and have a great day, afternoon, morning or night.